is Mark Gunn Media.
Hit it!
Welcome to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. I'm your host, Mark Gunn. The views expressed on this program are those of the host and guests and not necessarily reflective of anyone or any entity associated with this broadcast. This episode is brought to you by the Centers for Disease Control.
The best way to protect yourself from 2019 novel coronavirus is to avoid being exposed to the virus. Additionally, there are preventative actions that you can take to protect yourself and your family from the spread of respiratory viruses that can make you sick. These include stay home if you're sick, cover your cough, and wash your hands.
For more information, visit coronavirus.gov. That's coronavirus.gov. This episode, Black Conservatives, Black Trump supporters, and OpporCOONists. How to tell the difference. Welcome to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. My name is Mark Gunn. If you happen to be listening right now on envisionradio.com, remember, you can download and subscribe to past episodes wherever you get your podcasts. iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Podcast, YouTube, and of course our website at markgunmedia.com. The reason for this particular episode is quite simple. As I continue to watch the ongoing protests against racism and police brutality going on across the country, one thing has become abundantly clear. As black people, we are not nearly as united as we really need to be. As Malcolm X once put it,
there can be no black-white unity until there is first some black unity. We cannot think of being acceptable to others until we have first proven acceptable to ourselves.
I also talk about this in depth in our last episode, so check it out if you haven't. One of the biggest divisions among black people has always been political. Over the last 50 years or so, there's been a clear distinction between political parties. Democrats are seen as liberal and Republicans as conservatives. However, political affiliation doesn't always align with one's values.
What are the stereotypes of Republicans? White,
old,
greedy,
selfish, racist, definitely racist.
Take, for example, the Black Republican.
What are the stereotypes of Black Republicans?
Oreos,
Uncle Tom,
sellout. You must want to be white.
No connection to the black community. This is fun, right?
When you look at today's GOP, you'd be hard-pressed to understand why any black person would be a member. A little history is in order.
There was a time when Black Republicans were actually the norm.
African Americans, after the Civil War, are largely in the Republican Party, right? So this is where we get the phrase, the party of Lincoln. The Democratic Party is largely invested in the segregationist politics of America at the time.
In 1936, things start to change.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt runs for president on the Democratic platform and introduces the programs of the New Deal. African Americans overwhelmingly help re-elect FDR to the presidency. They're part of this new Democratic coalition.
Fast forward to 1964 and
the Republican Party nominates Barry Goldwater as its presidential candidate. This is the same man who votes against the 1964 Civil Rights Act. His nomination encourages segregationists, white supremacists, right, the KKK, to come out and endorse the Republican Party. For many African Americans, this is it. Game over.
On the eve of the convention, 40,000 people, half of them Negroes, demonstrate against Goldwater in the largest civil rights demonstration since the March on Washington last summer.
In that year, only 6% of African Americans support the Republican Party.
And in the past half century, not much has changed. In the 2012 presidential election, only 6% of the black vote went to the Republican Party.
To be more specific, it was Lee Atwater's Southern strategy that was a big catalyst for blacks leaving the GOP en masse.
How abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than white.
So again, the question remains, knowing this history, how is it that some blacks classify themselves as Republicans? Part of the answer is rooted in the GOP's one-time stated conservative values. Black conservatism is a political and social philosophy rooted in communities of African descent that aligns largely with the conservative ideology around the world. Black conservatives emphasize traditionalism, patriotism, self-sufficiency, and strong cultural and social conservatism within the context of the Black church. In the United States, it's often, but not exclusively, associated with the Republican Party. Now, while there's nothing wrong with being a conservative, because let's face it, most Black folks are conservative when it comes to social issues, but because of the well-earned racist reputation of the Republican Party, being a Black conservative presents its own challenges.
Right. So then how do y'all feel about Black conservatives?
The Black bourgeoisie, that's all I gotta say. I've never, I know.
They don't want you to know them, okay?
Yeah. They don't want you to know them. How I see it, they house Negroes at the end of the day. That's just facts. That's big facts. That's big facts. They just house Negroes. It's like supporting a party. I mean, honestly, we're gonna be real. Both parties have never, like, to me, haven't done anything for Black people in the sense of, like, I want a policy. I don't want no speeches. I want policy. But about conservatives, it's just like y'all house Negroes. Like, y'all just trying to please this white man so y'all can be on his good side. So as much as I want to look past, like, oh, you're a person and you might be confused, but, like, your personal values are tied in policies that affect my life.
Like, voting for Trump is not about being a Republican. You voted for somebody who blatantly supports and encourages white supremacy. Like, hate crimes are way up.
So, like, when you think about, you know, the Black Student Union supports, like, diversity, right? Do you guys also support that diversity in thought? Like, would young Black conservatives, could they feel welcome in this space that it is supposed to be welcoming for Black students?
That's a unique word. Yeah. I wouldn't say welcome, but I'll definitely say feel challenged. To back up the reason why you believe, and I will do the same, as well as everybody else, with some facts and also with some emotions.
There's a catch-22 for Black conservatives. Too Black for the GOP and not Black enough for the Democrats. Can you imagine people like Booker T. Washington, Nora Zeal Hurston, and Dr. Condoleezza Rice being labeled as sellouts or Uncle Toms? Now, here's where Black people really need to get on the same page. While we can all agree on the merits of conservative principles,
hard work, education, thrift can take you far beyond what a government program can give you.
We need to realize that we are not a monolithic people, and more young Blacks are attracted to the conservative movement, but they are a lot smarter about it.
I'm Mike Roundtree, political director for the Morehouse College Republicans, and we're primarily interested in spreading the conservative word.
When you're talking about government acting in our self-interest, I mean, I don't see it.
But when it comes to the GOP's relationship to Blacks, these guys are trying to change the party from within.
What is it about the ideology of the Republican Party that attracted you to it?
The basic theoretical notion of personal responsibility. If you stay the correct course, then you will reap the benefits of that. And I believe that, the platform of the Republican Party gives individuals that mindset.
And it gets a little complicated with race. Did we start out on a level playing field?
So that's one of the things that I don't think Republicans acknowledge. How could you possibly say that, racism was not something that kept Blacks back? But I do know that if we empower the individuals now, give them hope for education, if we give them the opportunities, at least we'll be moving forward.
There's a piece missing to the pie. And I think it's really understanding people, getting to know us as people, not as a voter base.
Certainly those things are things that the Republican Party as a whole has to make a part of the platform if we're interested in having Black voters.
Coming up, being a Black Republican in the age of Trump, right after this.
If you're an advertiser, one of the most important things about getting your message out is actually standing out from the rest of the crowd. If you're listening to this program right now, this is where you'd hear your commercial. As an exclusive sponsor of Gunshots Straight from the Hip, your commercial is professionally produced and gets a longer shelf life based on your needs. Gunshots Straight from the Hip is a unique and compelling program unlike anything else in the marketplace. Episodes are available for download on iTunes, TuneIn, and MarkGunMedia.com. And depending on how you tailor your message, the potential for new and repeat customers is that much greater. Best of all, it's extremely cost-effective. If you'd like more information on how you can be a sponsor of this broadcast, call Mark Gunn Media, Inc. at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Or log on to markgunmedia.com. For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com. Welcome back to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. I'm Mark Gunn. We're talking about black conservatives, black Trump supporters, and OpporCOONists, and how to tell the difference. There's a question that the GOP continues to be faced with. Former Chief of Staff of the Republican National Committee, Michael Steele, was brave enough to actually answer.
Do you think that the Republican Party has a racism problem?
Yes, they do. And I think we need to be honest and acknowledge it. People say, well, this has something to do with race. Yeah, it does. I'm not saying you are racist. I'm saying you're having a problem with talking about and making expressions around race that oftentimes come off not just insensitive, but downright racist.
Still, there are those within the Republican Party who remain in total denial.
America is not a racist country.
Ever since the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the Republican Party has gained a well-earned reputation.
My party, let me just be candid, my party is full of racists.
This is another sticking point with black Republicans, as even they acknowledge the problem. Former Secretary of State General Colin Powell.
I think the Republican Party right now is having an identity problem, and I'm still a Republican. But in recent years, there's been a significant shift to the right, and we have seen what that shift has produced to losing presidential campaigns. I think what the Republican Party needs to do now is take a very hard look at itself and understand that the country is changing demographically. And if the Republican Party does not change along with that demographic, they're going to be in trouble. And so when we see that in one more generation, the minorities of America, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans will be the majority of the country, you can't go around saying we don't want to have a solid immigration policy. We are going to make it hard for these minorities to vote, as they did in the last election. What did that produce? The court struck most of that down. Most importantly, it caused people to turn out and stand in line because these Republicans are trying to keep us from voting. There's also a dark vein of intolerance in some parts of the party. They still look down on minorities. Why do senior Republican leaders tolerate this kind of discussion within the party? I'm a moderate, but I'm still a Republican. That's how I was raised. And until I voted for Mr. Obama twice, I had voted for 7 straight Republican presidents.
That problem has been exacerbated by the election of Donald J. Trump, who has shown himself time and time again to be a racist.
We begin our campaign.
Racist tweets, derogatory terms, and a president digging in on culture wars. President Trump retweeted a video of supporters at a retirement community in Florida. One man can be heard chanting the white supremacist slogan, "White Power."
White power!
Hours later, the president deleted the tweet, but the damage was already done. And in the wake of national protests on racism and police violence, he has retweeted incidents of violence carried out by African Americans against white Americans. Eddie Glaude Jr. is the African American Studies Department chair at Princeton University.
What's so offensive about that for people who maybe don't get it?
At the end of the day, what we're seeing here is a kind of white nationalist politics making its way into the mainstream in an unadulterated way.
Glaude says the bigger picture is that Trump is using race to stoke fear, like many Republican leaders before him.
I think the idea of appealing to white resentment and white fears, drawing on a particular understanding of America as fundamentally white, that language has been a part of Republican strategy since I remember remembering, right? It's been a part of my political reality ever since I became aware of American politics. So he sits somewhere in the spectrum between Ronald Reagan and George Wallace.
So as a black Republican, how do you support a man who continues to show you time and time again his racism and his affinity for white supremacy?
I think that this go back comment hit a lot of us that support him. It hit a lot of us in the gut, I think. And I think that a lot of us of color, conservatives who support the president, I talked to a lot of my friends and we're still trying to process. It just came out of left field. And this is probably one of the most controversial comments that ever came out of the White House. And so, I don't know, I'm still processing it myself. And I think that the president is putting a lot of us in a very precarious situation, people that would have supported him. I think the president has a base, and he has a far right-wing base. And there's a lot of white nationalists, a lot of racists, a lot of anti-Semites in that base. And I feel as though the president has said, okay, I had a small margin of African Americans, small margin of Latinos, small margin of LGBT. So what I'm going to do is I am going to have a PR strategy that is going to rile up the base. A lot of us feel like, wow, like where do we fit in, anymore? Are we still welcome in this movement? Are people of color still welcome? So a lot of us are still reeling from that comment. And I will tell you, a lot of my friends that are black conservatives, a lot of them have jumped off the Trump train. They've gone over to Kamala Harris's side. They've got involved in her campaign and also Joe Biden's. The president, there's a lot of people that believed in him, and I think that the president's got to understand that, when he attacks Colin Kaepernick, when he attacks LeBron James, Steph Curry, you're attacking the very people that you say that you're trying to reach look up to as role models. And so I think that it's up to the president. Do you really want to have an inclusive campaign? Do you want to have an inclusive run? Do you want to have an inclusive administration, or don't you?
As more black Republicans are finding that they no longer have a party, there are still a number of blacks who support Trump. Some merely appear to be caught up in Trump's cult of personality, and others are what I call OpporCOONists. I'll explain after this.
One of the biggest accomplishments we've had over the past year is the continued growth of our podcast, Gunshots Straight from the Hip. If you haven't heard it, you can check it out now on our website at markgunmedia.com or on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the TuneIn Radio app. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Past episodes are available for download right now. Each episode is written and produced from a perspective not heard enough in this medium, the black perspective. However, Gunshot Straight from the Hip is not limited to a black audience. Anyone can get something out of it. We tackle social and political issues, sometimes some slice of life stuff, in a way that's very compelling and unlike any other podcast on the market right now. With my experience as an award-winning audio producer and a reputation for being rather outspoken, Gunshots Straight from the Hip is something you won't want to miss. Over the next year, we want to add more subscribers with a goal of 1,000 new subscribers every month. If you haven't joined us yet, go to our website at markgunmedia.com and hit the podcast link. You could also subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you're already with us, thank you. We just ask that you turn your friends and family on to us. Remember, we have a goal of 1,000 new subscribers every month, and we can't do it without your support. That's Gunshots Straight from the Hip, available right now at markgunmedia.com, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the TuneIn Radio app. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Mark Gun Media. No hype, no hoopla, just damn good work.
For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com.
Welcome back to Gunshot Straight from the Hip. I'm Mark Gunn. This episode, we're talking about black conservatives, black Trump supporters, and OpporCOONists, and how to tell the difference. Now, we've talked about black conservatives and the challenges they face for aligning themselves with a party that continues to be anti-black and anti-people of color.
I'm having a hard time having this conversation because while I understand black representation in government is critical and highly important, I think we're now moving into a spot where it's hard to co-sign a black Republican or someone who doesn't align with those values. If you are a black person running for office, you're going to have to speak to issues that are impacting black folk. My issue with supporting the fact of the endangered Republican is that it just doesn't matter what their race is, it matters what their politics are. And I understand that they are...
Got it. Yeah, but you said that you can't, I think, co-sign a black Republican. What do you mean by that?
If I wanted to vote for a person of color or a black person specifically, if my only option was a black Republican, I would still vote Democrat.
That is ridiculous, and I find that to be extremely problematic. You're sitting here telling me that because I'm a Republican that I'm out of touch with black issues? You are not going to sit here on this show and tell me that as an African American who happens to be a Republican that I am out of touch with being black? You are ridiculous for that statement.
I did not say you were out of touch for being black.
You are ridiculous
I'm saying
for
you're
that
out of touch with the policy demands of black folks.
Are you kidding me?
Which is why black people overwhelmingly vote Democrat. I'm not saying that you are not black. You absolutely have a black experience. Black people are not monoliths. But if we're looking at the play-by-play of the issues that are important to our communities, Republicans do not represent that, black or not.
The majority of Republican politicians have shown their craven cowardice when it comes to speaking out against Donald Trump. They fear him and they fear his base. Part of that base includes black people who appear to be caught up in the Trump cult of personality.
I think that you see with the election of Donald Trump, we saw more African Americans vote for a Republican for president than in the last decade. And I think that shows that there is a increased curiosity with the Republican Party.
These are black folks that will defend Donald Trump no matter what.
I love President Donald J. Trump. The media is attacking him, but when they attack him, they are attacking us because he is out here fighting for us.
We need to make sure we fight for this man, the one man who is standing up for black America. We are going to fight for, guys. We have to keep it going.
I love this guy right here. Let me give this guy a hug right here. I love this guy right here.
Thank you for being brave. Thank you for making the black community a priority. And this is why you will get our vote in 2020.
And the biggest pushback you get from these surrogates is that Trump, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, is not a racist.
God bless Donald Trump. God bless you. And God bless America.
Well, I know he's not a racist. I mean, I was convinced that first day from that first conversation, and the reason I was convinced was because he did not go overboard trying to convince me he was not a racist.
It hurt my soul to hear the terrible names that people call Donald. The worst one is racist. I take it as a personal insult that people would think I've had a 37-year friendship with a racist. People who think that don't know what they're talking about. Growing up in the Deep South, I've seen racism up close. I know what it is, and it isn't Donald Trump.
Herschel Walker, who spoke at the first night of the Republican National Convention, hasn't been known to be a politically active person, but he has been a staunch conservative for years. Pastor Darrell Scott, on the other hand, falls into a category of black people I call OpporCOONists. That's OpporCOONist. An OpporCOONist is a black person who is being compensated in some way to be the black apologist for white racism. These are the Uncle Ruckuses and the Step-and-Fetchits of the political party. They tap dance on the political stage by saying and doing things that are denigrating to the black community. Some famous OpporCOONists include former Milwaukee Sheriff David Clark, disgraced Army General Allen West, the aforementioned Pastor Darrell Scott, Paris Denard, two of the most famous OpporCOONists, Diamond and Silk.
Trump is not a racist. He's a realist. And the only color he sees is green, and he wants you to have some of it.
Ironically, they've taken to accusing Fox News of racism after them being fired earlier this year.
They have been cut from Fox Nation, which is the online Fox screening thing. They have been tweeting about, of course, which everyone I think takes for granted now, that coronavirus was basically born from 5G technology. That is, the cell phone technology created the virus. And then apparently Diamond and Silk also said they'd avoid taking a coronavirus vaccine if Bill Gates is involved because he pushed for population control. And apparently, according to the Daily Beast, they will not be on Fox anymore because of those conspiracy theories.
Kanye West is another OpporCOONist who's either too stupid or too self-absorbed to realize that he's being played.
Kanye West has officially filed to get his name on the ballot as a presidential candidate in Wisconsin. Since he announced his candidacy last month, he has had mixed success meeting ballot requirements in various states. It's becoming increasingly clear he's getting help from Republicans and Trump supporters, leading some to question whether a clearly vulnerable Mr. West is being used to try to siphon votes away from Joe Biden.
And perhaps the most famous OpporCOONist and current flavor of the month, or at least she used to be, Candace Owens.
Black lives have never, ever, ever mattered to the Democrat Party. Black votes always have. They create this narrative every 4 years that the Republicans are racist. They try to scare us. Are we such punks that we are so scared to try something different because every 4 years they knock for our votes and they say, vote for us because the other guy's racist? This is our time. Make America great again is for us too.
Her Blexit movement, designed to get black people to leave the Democratic Party en masse, has failed miserably. She was also recently denounced by a group of black conservatives because of her statements regarding the murder of Ahmaud Arbery.
Black conservative statement on Candace Owens tweets, we, the undersigned black conservative leaders, unequivocally condemn the hate-filled and destructive words tweeted and spoken by Candace Owens. In the freest country on the face of the earth, no black man deserves to be gunned down like a dog in the street. Blackness is not a weapon. Blackness is not a threat. The words spoken by Candace are not reflective of the black conservative movement and should be universally condemned by the broader conservative movement and all who support freedom and liberty. Her words provide shield and cover for these type of incidents to continue. This is not the role of the black conservative. Our hearts go out to Ahmaud Arbery's family, and we continue to lift them in prayer. Black men and women have a right to live freely in this country. We all have a responsibility to protect that right. We have a responsibility to condemn her hate-filled and inaccurate tweets and statements.
And as a result, was asked to leave her post as communications director for the conservative think tank Turning Point USA. The latest indignity being that she was not invited to speak at this year's Republican National Convention. Now, what all these OpporCOONists fail to realize is that they were never really part of the GOP. They were allowed to be there until they outlived their usefulness. Bottom line, every skin folk ain't kinfolk. So, after weeding out the OpporCOONists and the Trump cultists, and realizing that black Republicans and conservatives are important to the fight for freedom, justice, and equality, what do they do, and what role do the rest of us play?
The Republican Party has to diversify. It can no longer be the party of just white men. At the end of the day, I'm trying to make the Republican Party more competitive. Many African Americans will say that the Democrats take them for granted.
And in an era of movements like Black Lives Matter, neither party can afford to ignore racial inequality.
We need Republican elected officials to, really step up and understand what is this Black Lives Matter movement about. They just see this as anti-police. The movement as a whole is saying that there are some serious issues out there impacting black men nationwide. I worry myself when, if I'm driving and I get pulled over by a police officer, he's not going to ask me for my party affiliation. The first thing he sees is a black man. Why are they intimidated by me?
It goes without saying that the Republican Party has a very serious image problem that black Republicans have to navigate through.
So how do you unstereotype black Republicans?
You go to those places where the people may not vote for you. They may not even like you, but they need you.
To spread the conservative word, to let people know that there is something different out there, that the status quo, what your parents did, what your grandparents did, is not what you have to do. This is another plausible option that I'm doing, and I hope that you can benefit from it.
Many African Americans think that a black Republican is someone black who grew up in a white suburb, but there's many of us that are black and have lived in the African American community, so it's really showing people that we're real. And, we are part of the community and we're here.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. It doesn't even matter if you're a liberal or conservative or moderate. What matters is at this particular point in history is that we are all black first. And we must have some serious conversations in order for all of us to reach some common ground.
Again, there's nothing wrong with being a conservative. There's nothing wrong with voting your political party. The issue is Trump. When Trump is making fun of people who are mentally handicapped, making fun of women, making fun of immigrants, making fun of refugees, making fun of black people. That is the issue. This is the wrong time for me to be a conservative.
What policies do you agree with that Trump has pushed forward?
He's actually trying to start urban revitalization with Ben Carson.
Wasn't Ben Carson a doctor? How is he going to help out with housing though?
Because he grew up in extreme poverty. So
I grew up in extreme poverty. I can't fix houses though.
I think we have seen a lot of improvement. I disagree. I haven't seen much.
One thing that really frustrated me is Trump's taking credit for the black unemployment rate. He did not do that. It started going down underneath Barack Obama. White nationalists literally said, I feel emboldened by Trump. You're black, I'm black.
Like, what did he have to say for you to stop agreeing with Trump?
Me hearing you talk is like, you don't support him. But you rep your party. I respect that. When black people, we have this ideology, Barack Obama is Jesus Christ, which is not even close. He didn't give no black people policy. But as a citizen, it's your civic duty, again, to hold them accountable.
For me, I guess a good way to put it is I'm sometimes Trump. There's things that I like, and there's things that I will call him out on. But when you take away my black card and say that I'm not black anymore, and you don't even want to discuss it with me, you just want to say that white people have brainwashed me, that's where I really have an issue.
I feel like it's not healthy to attack the black character. It's not going to do anything for us as a black community.
Yeah, it's counterproductive.
It's very counterproductive, and then at the end of the day, people are going to be like, oh, black people and black people don't like each other, so this is something that we have to discuss.
Just hearing this from you guys is, it really means a lot. It's great.
After all,
there can be no black-white unity until there is first some black unity.
You've been listening to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. The views expressed are those of the host and guests and not reflective of any business entity or anyone associated with this broadcast. If you have any comments or want more information on how to be a sponsor, log on to our website at markgunmedia.com or call us at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Thank you for listening.
Mark Gun Media. No hype, no hoopla, just damn good work.